Welcome. So first, I want to introduce myself first. My name is Yunan. As Vicky mentioned, I'm a contributing reporter for The Information. So shall we start? Okay, can you guys briefly introduce yourself and what you do and what are you trying to build right now? Start from Peter.
Hi, I'm Peter Pyun. I'm a principal solution architect at NVIDIA. We have 500 partners around the globe on autonomous driving. Last year we had 200. Right now, this year we have 500. So I tackle core engineering problems of end-to-end autonomous driving, from data collection, curation, training, inferencing, iterating, and making work. So I focus on deep learning and autonomous car. Very nice to meet you.
Thank you, Josh. Yeah, you just won the top 10 automotive startup, right, last year in Los Angeles. So do you mind telling us more about that experience?
Sure. I think that's kind of an indicator of where the industry is going a little bit. So our company, PolySync, builds underlying infrastructure for autonomous cars. And what we're heavily focused on right now is, what does a safe autonomous car for mass production look like? We think that this is actually a gating factor for autonomous vehicles to get out and get better, right? So everyone's seen the RAND Corporation study of, maybe everyone hasn't seen it, but 8.8 billion miles to validate autonomous cars. Like, the number of miles that Google has driven isn't even statistically significant in light of that. So we think that autonomous cars really need to get to the public in order for them to get good enough to really change our lives and have the level of impact that we all expect. In order to do that, we need to transition them from prototypes built on things like Linux and Docker and Python into something that is, safe enough that we can trust, to put our children in and ride in ourselves. So we're focused on, what does the functional layer of that, the functional safety layer, look like if it's safe and secure.
Okay, thanks. And also, yeah, can move on to the Amy.
Yeah. So my name is Amy Gu. I'm managing partner of Hemi Ventures. Hemi Ventures is an early stage venture capital fund based here in Bay Area office in Palo Alto. And we have a big focus in the autonomous vehicle space. So fortunately, we're an investor in PolySync, and we're an investor in Plus. And then we started to invest in the autonomy sector from last year. And so far, we have more than half of our portfolios are in auto. We are a big believer in the autonomous sector, and hopefully we'll be able to invest in more and more startups to make this self-driving car become real.
Thanks. Yeah, David.
Hi, I'm David Liu. I'm founder CEO of a company called PlusAI. We are a technology company focusing on building full-stack solution for autonomous driving. We have our core and R&D team here in the Valley, and then we also focus on a primary market in emerging markets like China. We not only focus on long-term technology development for level 4 complete self-driving, we also look at more of a near-term application of autonomous driving technology in various industries, including agriculture as well as commercial trucking.
Thanks for the introduction. So my first question is about a software infrastructure. So could you guys help us understand how important of the software infrastructure for self-driving cars in order to collect imagery and other sensor data generated by the cars, and whether such infrastructure can be built, can be outsourced or must be built in-house? Yeah, go ahead.
Sure, I can start. I think in order to understand the importance of software infrastructure, I mean, we have but to look at the phones, right, that are in our pockets. How many times, who is at a failure of their cell phone this week? Right? Like, it's broken, it's frozen up, it's left you hanging, maybe at an important time, something like that. But the dirty secret of the autonomous vehicle industry is that the cars that are driving around the streets today, they have safety drivers, partially, and not in any small part, because they're built on the same stuff, So, but when autonomous cars are on the road, those types of crashes that we're used to and are inconvenient, on our cell phones or our desktop computers, or even our websites, those are real crashes on the road, right? Those are places where people get harmed, where things get broken, where people lose trust, right, in autonomous vehicles. And so is software infrastructure important? I think it may be like the next most important thing for this industry to deal with. Can you build it in-house? I think that everybody builds emerging technology in-house, right? Like that's how we start, right? As an industry develops, characteristically, you start to have a diversity of firms that specialize in those things. And I think, especially in autonomous vehicles, these are some of the most complex cyber-physical systems that have ever existed. Can one firm hope to solve all problems extremely well on their own? I don't think so. I mean, that's why we have a vibrant startup community at all. So I think that no one company is going to solve these problems completely, and it'll take an army.
Is there anyone?
Yeah, I agree with Josh on the safety and the functional safety side. I want to address in the more the end-to-end autonomous driving from data collection. You know, you have to create this training data set, and then you inference. All this ecosystem of end-to-end, I'm talking about the deep learning, then you need to have this whole cycle iteratively, and that actually impacts all the experience that you have on the autonomous car. And I think that's critical elements of autonomous driving. You have the best infrastructure, you need to have a very dynamic, and you have to update your software on time, on the air, and you have to collect the data, all of the growth, and update your system, you know. And this is very critical. So I think this is a really differentiator for it.
Okay, thanks. David, Amy, do you have any thoughts or?
Sure. I think automotive industry up until this point, even though automobiles actually have one of the most complex software systems, people typically think of automotive industry as a hardware industry up until recently. I think we're in a period where we observe a transition where the perception of the industry going from a hardware business going to a software business. Even though not everybody agree with that, but I do see there's been a mode where you're seeing more and more software people get into this industry. And I think this is where a lot of innovations can come from. You're starting to see a lot of tech companies, starting from Google and Apple. And also, if you look at Tesla, is it really a pure hardware company? Or a lot of people look at it as one of the most soft automotive company. That's part of their strength, right? You look at the OTA updates of their cars. It's all this paradigm is going to a software paradigm, and with that, I think software infrastructure is probably the most critical thing going forward for the automotive industry.
Thank you.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think software right now is definitely the key to the success of the autonomous driving world. And we have been looking at hundreds of self-driving startups in the past year or so. A lot of them are focusing on the software pieces and are actively working with car makers in terms of integrating with existing car hardware. A lot of people would compare, I think, the car industry with the smartphone industry 6, 7, 10 years ago, right? So there's definitely going to be a big change in the car industry, and I do think a lot of people in the industry are already aware of it. So that's why you see a lot of acquisitions, you see a lot of partnership, because I think at the end of the day, OEMs, from their perspective, they do not want to be ignored. They want to catch up the wave, the trend of the new technologies. I think coming back from software world myself, I would say for the self-driving car industry, definitely software is going to be a big component of both OEMs and also startups and also related partners, tier 1, tier 2 in the industry right now. I would say I think another important pieces a lot of software people haven't realized or kind of are yet to learn is actually the safety issue, the safety in terms of the driving and also the safety in terms of production. I think Josh just mentioned safety also. I do think that part from my experience of talking to a lot of software founders in the auto sector, I do see, I think that is, for them, is actually a very deep learning curve. A lot of people are learning about that, and then so hopefully I think that will be something people can learn as soon as possible, and then I think that will become we will see more software sort of startups being able to work with OEMs much easier.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so what will the real safe and secure self-driving car look like in your guys' opinion? Josh?
Sure. Okay. That's actually a really interesting and difficult problem. I mean, I tend to think of autonomous vehicles actually as kind of a new software, a new compute paradigm, right? They're as connected as cell phones, as processing, massive amounts of, supercomputer amounts of sensor data, but they need to be as safety critical as the space shuttle. And so there's a lot of work to do to really reinvent or sort of dredge up, as we're doing, things out of academia, things out of the science to help understand what safe really means. And I think a lot of the industry is grappling with that. To relate an anecdote, I was at the Automated Vehicle Symposium up in San Francisco earlier this week, and I was in a safety panel, and there's a guy up there and he's talking all about, automated driving, we need more agile software development. So for those of you who know, that's a way to develop software that's very rapid. And it really was meant to sort of put a minimum prototype in front of users really quickly, right? And the question that came up from some guys in the back that were like, I actually built the International Space Station. He goes, well, why? Why is that better? So, and there's no answer. I couldn't even answer that, right? So, I think a big question that us, as the industry as a whole needs to ask is why? What does that safe system look like? We have some ideas at our company, and we've heard some other really interesting ones at the fringes. The conversation is just starting now, but we know that it's something that's much faster than developing the International Space Station, but much safer than your cell phone. So what is that solution? I hope in the next couple of years that we'll start to see it.
Thank you.
We do have experience. I mean, the human beings knows how to make a safety critical system, like in military and the space. The key question is that nobody actually had experience deploy in a massive billions of units of scale in a car, which is very safety critical. You don't want to ride in an autonomous car that your family that's 99% safe, but there's the still failure percentage of 0.01%. So how to make it more economically scalable system for the mass producing autonomous car, that's a new challenge. I think there's many aspects, not only in the hardware and software, that, as Josh mentioned, also in the hardware aspects as well.
Yeah, maybe I can follow up with one more thought. I think especially around safety, the safety is one of those things that safety is the thing that never happened, right? Safety is all the times that your car didn't break and hurt you or other people. It's the thing that hopefully you never know about, and so that presents a difficulty, right? It's not only is it not as shiny, but ideally you never hear about it. And so for me, what does a safe autonomous car look like? It's the one that just never stops working. But beyond that, I think what's interesting to think about safety is to think about trust at a higher level, right? So just to be safe is one thing, But as an industry, we need to look at like what happens when I'm taking my autonomous taxi to the airport, right? I'm a first-time user. Man, this is really cool technology. And something breaks, like the main computer, releases its magic smoke, right? And the vehicle does a safe thing, right? Pulls off to the side of the road on the highway, right? And I have to wait. And I have to wait for some other thing to come pick me up. Maybe I miss my flight, right? I don't care if it costs 10 cents on the dollar or if it was free. Right? I missed my flight. I'll never trust that system again. And I think I'll never trust probably, will it just be that brand or will it be the entire, set of technology? So, I think when we think in terms of safety, we need to think a lot more in terms of, uptime as well.
Yeah, I think that's Josh bring up a very important issue is I think as people who work in the industry, we can talk about safety in terms of mass production. That's all on the manufacturing and then the car maker side. But from a consumer perspective, what does safety mean? So I remember I went to a bank, Wells Fargo the other day, and then I was, so the banker was asking me what I'm doing. I was like, oh, I invest, and then what is invest? I was like, I invest in an autonomous car. And he was like, wow, that's going to be safe. So I think that kind of response is very typical these days among the consumers. Now the question comes, now we're talking about, the timeline of somewhere between 2019 to 2025, when a car maker said there will be a autonomous car on the road. Will consumers be comfortable with it? Will the media be happy with it? Or what's the critic going to be look like? I think from an investment perspective, that's what actually we are looking into a lot of times. I do think right now there's a wrong impression especially on the media side. Well, information did a good job, but some other media in terms of having criticizing the self-driving vehicle as something not safe. I think it's not accurate to just say something's not safe. It's all about it has to be about comparison and benchmarking. So let's take, for example, speech recognition these days. A lot of people are using their Siri right now, using Amazon Alexa at home. It is accurate. Then what's the benchmark? If you look at the human sort of a speech recognition, the error rate for human is actually 5.9%. So it's still not super accurate, but if you look at what Microsoft, Google, and some other companies are doing right now, the error rate is even lower there than human. So I think in the self-driving car world, it's like the same thing. Like when we're talking about human driving, it is safe. I'm pretty sure not everyone the same. There's a number from some industry survey recently saying actually the human driving error rate or just sort of the risk rate is actually a 94%. So there are 6% of the drivers driving on the road not safe. And then what's the benchmark for this autonomous car right now, self-driving car right now? No one has that number yet, just because people are still developing the vehicle. Nothing has been commercialized yet. But I believe when one day, if an autonomous vehicle come on the road, and then if you can look at the average number, the error rate is going to be lower than that 6%. Then it's actually going to be safer than human driving. I believe that will be the day for people to realize actually autonomous vehicles is safer. So I do think the industry should focus more on the benchmarking and being able to decrease that error rate so that it can compete with human and really make sure us as a driver sitting in the vehicle can be actually even safer than before. That's our goal. So hopefully that will be achieved someday.
I actually don't have much to add other than I believe time and good engineering will make cars really safe.
Okay, that's a good answer. Yeah, so let's go back to talk about the software infrastructure. So I'm just curious, how many ways do we have to commoditize the software? And what will be the real differentiator in the future for that?
So I think that's a very good question, and one of the most difficult question that you have, I think, in the panel. And many people, many OEMs and startups are very curious. Right now, we really do not know what's the minimal set of the hardware and the software to make level 4 autonomous driving. So there are many angles of directions in R&D. As one of the advantages of working at NVIDIA is that we can see all the directions that people are having. There are numerous approaches right now. And because of that, we really not sure what to outsource and what to not. I don't think we are at that stage. Probably in 2020, where most people announced they will do the autonomous car by year 2020. At that time, probably we have some minimal set of the core elements on hardware, sensors, and the softwares. And at that stage, we may be able to have some glimpse of what can be outsourced or not. I'll give you one example of, for example, like a data collection. So data collection, data curation can be very trivial job. This is very boring. You don't need any degrees on the university to do the data curation and the labeling. But this is absolutely critical to make deep learning to succeed. So you cannot really completely outsource them. It's very easy that have the worst data, the corrupted data, and then ruin the entire deep learning algorithms. So you cannot really outsource everything. Another example is training, that many people use Amazon Web Service. But how can we rely on Amazon Web Service for very mission-critical, time-critical projects? You need to have somehow in-house expertise. What you have to have use for training and expertise your process, what to train on and what kind of algorithm to use. You need to have internal resources. Otherwise, you cannot outsource them, and you will be very, very commoditized, and everybody's running into autonomous driving field, and you not going to succeed in this competition. So I think that everybody has to have some infrastructure developed in-house, and then have some expertise, and especially get the good people in-house, and then decide what to outsource and what to not, and decide what would be the differentiator. And I think that the real differentiator is the user experience. What kind of user experience actually eventually get. If you look at the phone cases like Apple versus Android, and people pay more money to get the better user experience. I think that would be the same for the autonomous driving.
Thank you. Anyone has any thoughts?
Sure, I can take one. I think with a long enough time horizon, pretty much everything gets commoditized. Eventually. Well, so I think the only places where there's long-term differentiation for a product are network effects, marketplace dynamics, and brand. Sorry, product people. So the question will be twofold. I think sort of who gets there first, and then who nails it, right? So if you can get there first and nail it, you probably have a long-term brand differentiator. And potentially the others as well, but there's so many factors in that, right? Who would have known that Apple Computer would have come up with something that made you want their computers over anybody else? So there's a combination there of providing the service, but then sort of holding other folks off with the implementation. So will something be commoditized or not? It's incredibly difficult to make that call. I think there's a lot of really smart people trying to make sure that their little part won't be.
I just want to add one more differentiator to the three you mentioned, which is actually on technology there is one. I think this mentioned by Peter Thiel, so it's not my theory. It's about putting together extremely complex system. So meaning, for instance, putting together a SpaceX. Autonomous driving may not be that complex, but at the moment it's quite a complex engineering endeavor. So you look at, I think to drive to the level 4 autonomous driving, I believe the investment level will be somewhere close to, even if you do it very innovatively and you do it correctly, on the first shot, it's on the order of between $50 to at least $100 million investment. And this is with all the right engineers, with the right infrastructure selection and the right technology decision. And it's still going to take perhaps the next 5 years to actually get there. So to put this together and to make all the right decision and to come out to be the winner to provide that right solution. I do believe that that'll be a differentiator for a little while. Eventually, of course, all of this will be commoditized. But I do think that's what all these companies are fighting for, right? No one is able to provide a true level 4 autonomous driving solution today, and no one claimed to be able to provide that in the next 2 or 3 years. And that's what startups like us, we have a take on a certain direction to be correct, and we're making a bet on that.
Yeah, I can add one thing. I think all the panelists talk about very valuable, I think, technical expertise. If you look at the history of software, I think there's always different generations, different type of software. I remember we invested in a open source software before, and I sit there. I was like, so how are you guys going to make money? Everyone can use it, and it's free, and then you're not going to make any money. But then I think the startup actually gave me a list of companies that's making a lot of money just based on open source software, free open source software. And at the end of the day, I think for companies, customers, users, it's not only about the code, the algorithm that's what they're paying for. It's actually about the service, right? The brand, the experience, and the kind of usability, as David just talk about. So I think that part is actually more important than just think about the pure algorithm itself. And so no matter, I think, whether there will be a lot of people developing that, whether there will be potential sort of more and more disruption in this industry, I do think the service and then the other part of value will be more important than the code itself.
Yeah, as Josh mentioned earlier, right now we have a lot of players in the industry. We have like big companies, tech company like Apple and Google, and we have ride-hailing company like Uber, and we have OEMs like Ford and GM, and also like startups like you guys, all trying to building self-driving cars. So I'm just curious, who do you think, who's leading the race right now? Who's having the advantage at this point? And also for startup, how do you compete with these big players in the industry? Whoever want to.
I'm pretty sure they would say they're leading, but.
Well, okay, David.
I think there is a clear leader, right? I mean, Google is leading the field. So I guess then the question is, what the heck are we doing? So in certain industries, there's an opportunity for startups when it's at the dawn of the industry. We believe the race to providing the final solution for self-driving or for complete automation, it's not over. It actually just got started. And if we believe that Google is doing everything correctly and is tackling every problem, then there is no opportunity for us. I mean, they've got more people, more technology, more resources, more data, more everything than us. So, the answer to what the heck are we doing is clearly we believe there's something that we're doing more correctly, or there's a certain target market we're addressing that they're not looking at. So for this particular problem we're looking at, and we believe we're on the right track, and for that I believe we're leading.
I think it's hard to say who is leading, right? I mean, just like if you look at car industry right now, who is leading? I think the top 3 or 5 constantly keep changing. So I think that's the same thing for self-driving car as well. I think right now, definitely by Google started earlier, they definitely have some sort of advantage. But so far, I mean, the the direction of this whole industry hadn't been decided yet. There's a level 3, there's a level 4, level 5, whether it's a full stack solution, whether it's just like Tesla doing, all-in-one, no one knows yet. So that's why I think companies like Plus and PolySync are all having opportunities. And especially I think on the vertical problems, right? Different problems, there will be different answer. So I don't really think there's sort of very obvious leader right now, and I think everyone has opportunity. So if you anyone do startup, you can do it.
Any thoughts from you guys?
You're gonna go. So we talk a lot about the autonomous cars industry. It's not an industry, right? There's nothing you can buy today that was made less expensive, right, by the fact that it was transported on an autonomous truck, right? You can't go outside and get your autonomous Uber. You can't really even buy the technology in any meaningful way. It's not an industry. There's no consumer money coming into it. It's a really big investment-backed science project.
Science project? Oh no.
Right, we're all working towards something. We're all working towards something. And so to answer your question, to me, right, we work with startups, tier ones, OEMs, semiconductor folks. We worked across the industry. 5 years I've been in this industry. To me, the companies that I think that are leading are the ones that have found a business model. Right, the ones that know how they're going to use autonomous driving, not to build autonomous driving, but to serve the consumer in some specific way. And there are not that many of those companies out there. So for the ones that are doing that, they're in the lead.
So I think I have some different perspective in terms of product. So because this is a car that you're going to use, this is not a R&D, just research work. You cannot build a car based on the paper. And what's needed to have this autonomous car based on you have this massive amount of data and how to compute and how to process it and deploy. And so you can think of it as a data infrastructure and the computing engine. Then the answers are who's leading in this platform, who has the best talent to make the products. And in that perspective, I disagree with most of what you said. And we have a track record on the mobile industry, what happened. And so that's my answer. Instead of naming specific companies, I think if you think of who has the credentials on this aspect, and you have to be really a platform player to not just having one particular product per se. I think who's leading this platform. I think NVIDIA is one of them because you need a massive amount of computing. That's why NVIDIA stocks become 5 times larger than compared to last year.
Got it. Yeah, one last question. So 2 months ago, you guys probably know that Elon Musk made a really bold proclamation. He said in about 2 years, so all the Tesla owners will be able to sleep at the start of the drive and wake up at their destination. So do you agree with him? Do you think he will be able to deliver his promise? And what time or when do you think we'll have fully autonomous vehicles on the road?
Absolutely. I strongly believe that time will come in our lifetime, within 5 years. Yeah. So actually, we announced many partnerships with Toyota, Audi, and we work with 500 partners. And I think time will be absolutely realized in 10 years. And whoever comes in 5 years, will have a leading advantage. And then once they approve that we can show level 4 driving, then the time will come to commoditize what's the winning algorithm, software and hardware. Then we will decide what will be outsourced and what will be not. And I think at that time, market will be really polarized into 2 segments. One is a luxury market, and the other is just the regular economy. So whoever who wants to use just regular shared economy model like Uber, or whoever who wants to pay extra for the luxury environment, like Uber Black or whatever. So I think at that time there will be like that, and the number of cars will be reduced dramatically. Like people are saying that 1/10 or 1/5. So at least half of the car will be eliminated, and then there will be huge change in our life actually. Yeah, yeah.
I think that's going to be a difficult goal to hit in that time frame, to put it mildly. There's been amazing advances in AI, like many of them thanks to NVIDIA, right? Sensing as well. We've seen amazing LiDAR coming out and things like that. But to actually integrate all those things into a system that you can fall asleep in, I mean, that is a start. To me, it's a startling proclamation. Just think about it. Your steering system in a standard car today, it's called an electronic power actuated steering, EPAS. Typically, this has a motor and it senses your input torque and trying to like make that feel right and minimize it and things like that. So what happens if that one motor breaks, right? Well, the steering stops working. So I hope that doesn't happen while I sleep. So in order to just get that thing working, I've got to have an entirely new actuator design. Now, it's true that those actuators are in process, and the suppliers are getting requests for coming up with dual redundant actuators, steering, brakes, throttle, all those things. But really, it's a difficult. Really, there's difficulty. That's just one example, right? The sensing side, right? Well, LiDAR doesn't work very well in the fog. I hope it doesn't get foggy while I'm sleeping, right? So I mean, you start to look at all the failure conditions that define what a safe system looks like. That's before we even look at failure of underlying components. What capacitors need to do? How reliable do the chips need to be? Right? How many computers? The list of those things that define what a safe system looks like, just from an infrastructure perspective, it's so long as to be completely unsolved at this point. And so to go into production in 2 years, I'd be very surprised if they can solve that. Maybe they decided not to solve that part. I don't know, but then in that case, don't fall asleep.
I believe what he said, but I do have a question to ask back. Is whether I think he said whether everyone will be able to sleep well in the car, but my question is whether everyone will sleep in the car, right? There's a major difference out there. So that he needs to answer. It's just like self-driving cars. Today, if I'm coming, I can say, hey, in 3 years, there will be an autonomous car on the road. Of course, but then are people going to use it or not? I mean, that's another question. And whether consumers are willing to pay for that car, I think that is also another question. So I think that's actually the fundamental of this, I think, the science project is about, is whether customers are willing to pay, are willing to try, are feeling comfortable to try, and are willing to try it more and more. I think that is actually going to be the key, and it's not about saying big words. It's all about really make things happen.
Oh, I'm a big Elon Musk fan, so I'll give him benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, I have one last small question for David. Yeah, you're planning to launch a product in China, right? Yeah, so what do you think will be the difference in problem sets for self-driving cars between countries like China and the US, where the rules of roads differ widely?
Everything in China is different from the US.
That's true.
So if we're looking at urban driving for autonomous level 4 autonomous driving, obviously the road conditions are very different. The traffic rules are different. The roads are different. It's all quite different. So depending on how you structure the software, you either rewrite your rules or gather a different set of data and train your network. So you just have to rebuild all of that. But what you bring up is actually an interesting question, which is when people look at autonomous driving, they always think about what Google put out there, which is kind of urban condition passenger cars and all autonomous. But there's actually a much bigger, I wouldn't say much bigger, as big as a market out there on the non-consumer side, looking at industrial automation, which has much closer timeline to actually being realized. Right? So if you look at application in commercial, application in agriculture, all of these fields are ready to deploy some kind of autonomous driving, which is more of, from our company point of view, we're looking at adopting a lot of those technology to fields that has a near-term horizon.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time and participating in this discussion. I really enjoyed the conversation. Hope you guys enjoyed as well. Okay, thank you.